welcome back to our channel. For those that don't know, I'm Kelly.
I'm Alex.
And recently we finished posting all of our events that we did during our cross-country road trip last summer. And we decided to put out our tips that we had for that trip. So this video is our top 6 road trip tips. So unless you have anything you want to introduce, so why don't we just get right into the video?
So tip number 1 we have is make a budget.
Yes.
And then save a little more. So obviously for any trip you're planning, you're going to make a budget for all your different expenses that you're planning to do for your trip. So we did that as well, but then we recommend definitely saving a little extra on top of that.
Yeah, it's like providing yourself a little cushion for the what ifs on top of your already planned what ifs, if that makes any sense.
Came in handy for us
Mm-hmm.
because so we camp most of the way along our trip. We're planning to camp actually most of the way and maybe stay in an Airbnb 1 or 2 nights along the way in case we got tired of camping. But I actually got sick about halfway through the trip in the really hot part of the country, and it was just kind of miserable being sick trying to camp. So we actually ended up staying in an Airbnb a few extra nights than we had planned. But since we had saved more than we needed,
And we had that cushion.
Yep, it was no problem to just do what we need to do to make the trip fun.
Because you don't want to be stressing about finances on the trip. You just kind of want that to be already taken care of in a way.
Yep, so save a little extra on top of all of your planned budget and you'll make sure you have a great trip.
Yeah. So tip number 2 was probably a big one for me, maybe more, but make sure you have good snacks. I can't emphasize that enough. Like, have good snacks. Like, snacks that you like, but I would say have a variety of good snacks. And have a variety of good, healthier snacks, because there are times where that's all you're going to want. And then splurge a little and have some maybe not so healthy snacks. Don't keep it all strictly one or the other. That helps a lot, especially in our case, like it was a 17-day road trip. And so by like day 4 or 5, we were already sick of the snacks that we had brought. And so that made it just a little bit kind of blah, because you're going, like at certain parts, we were going through parts of area where there's just like nothing. There's nothing to do, nothing to see. It's just flat nothingness. And you wind up bored eating. I mean, let's just be honest. And so you're going to want good snacks. Another tip on that is we brought our dog on our road trip with us. Bring snacks for him or her too. They're sitting in the car just as long as you are, miserable just as much as you are. They're going to want stuff too. And if they're like, our dog, he honestly didn't beg for anything. He slept the whole trip. But it still is nice to have just something good for them to enjoy while they're just sitting around waiting for you to get to where you're going.
Yeah, and so our next tip that we have is to make a plan, but then be willing to be flexible.
Yes.
So, of course, with any trip, you're going to probably have a plan. Now, some people like to plan every little detail, people like Kelly, and some people are more like me, where we're just kind of like, let's just go with the flow, get out on the road, and figure it out. So I think kind of a mix between the two is maybe a good way to do it. It's kind of what we did.
Yeah.
So we kind of made like a Google Doc that was shared between both of us so we could kind of see and kind of play around with different scenarios and where we wanted to go, kind of hit our highlights and then figure out all the little details in between. But we didn't necessarily strictly stick to that schedule. So we might say these are the main things we want to do, or this is our preferred location to stay for the night.
Kind of have them like ranked in order of like, top 1, top 2, top 3 kind of thing for each person.
And then depending on how your trip goes, you'll just kind of figure those out along the way. You might, hit your top things, you may not.
But at least you have a master list, so you're not scrambling for ideas of what to do next.
Exactly.
You've already pre-thought that a little bit, but it's not like set in stone, like you have to go here, here, and here.
Yeah, and we kind of planned a couple days like in advance as we were going. And depends on the type of trip and the places you're staying. So we can, like, stay at a lot of campgrounds and sometimes Airbnb some nights. So we just kind of tried to keep ahead that every couple nights maybe have a place booked if we kind of knew, we're confident that we'd be in a certain place, by the next day or two, which is nice. But sometimes we literally had
we had nothing until
stay.
like we were needing someplace.
Yeah, I remember we were coming out of Los Angeles on Sunset Boulevard towards the Pacific Coast there, and
nowhere to stay.
We
hadn't planned that far yet.
And we were hoping to camp, and so
every campsite we went to was full.
Yep. So we just kind of got on the coastal highway there and drove until we found a state park that had availability.
Yeah, they only had like 3 or 4 spots, and we were like, all right, well, I guess we're stopping here. Like, it wasn't part of our plan, but it worked out okay.
Yeah, but we'd already scattered out. I kind of already knew what was in the general area.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of went down the list until we found something that worked for us. So have a plan, but then be willing to be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
So our next tip we have is...
It kind of piggybacks off that a little bit.
Which is don't drive the whole time on your road trip. Obviously, you're going to see things and do things.
And it's a road trip.
Yeah, you're going to be driving.
There's going to be some driving in there.
But we recommend really try not to drive too much, especially in one day. For us, since we were going kind of East Coast to West Coast, you might have a couple days where, kind of some long stretches. But try not to drive a lot every day because you're just going to get tired of it.
It just gets annoying and it makes the trip just unfun.
Yeah, make sure you have plenty of time to get out and do stuff and just enjoy being wherever you are.
And when you don't, you feel rushed almost, and you feel like you're going to miss out on stuff, and that just makes the whole experience kind of eh.
And that leads us into our next tip.
Yeah, tip number 4.
Which is to don't be afraid to not see, do, visit everything, right? Depending on where you're going, you may have a really long list of things you want to do and see, and we did, especially because we were going, basically visiting like whole half the country.
That we had never been to at that point.
And so, there's so many things you want to do, but we had to realize you just got to limit yourself. Unless you have a whole bunch of time in the world, which we didn't. We had about 2.5 weeks. It's really important to just kind of pick what you want to do. We try to do a little too much at times and try to go everywhere, but then you kind of find yourself, like we just talked about, driving too much.
Or stretched very thin. And then you get frustrated because you didn't hit everything on your list. And then, again, that's just not fun either. I would suggest maybe picking 2 or 3 things to do like per day. In whatever area. If you choose to stay in the area longer, that's okay. Pick a new set of 2 or 3. But I would stick with 2 or 3. Try not to make it too much, but don't limit yourself where like you're doing one thing only and it just feels like that's all you did. I mean, depending on what you're choosing to do. Tip number 6 is bring comfy stuff or comfy items. Again, you're on a road trip, so you're going to be in the car for however amount of time. For us, it was 17 days, not continuous, but basically continuous. And bring something comfy. I personally like to bring my personal pillow on trips like this. It's just something that's a little bit comfy for me. It reminds me of home and just helps me get a little bit more comfortable in the car when I'm not driving. I also suggest bring a blanket, something small. I mean, we were in the desert, so it was hot, but there were times where you still just wanted to get cozy because you're just bored. I mean, at some point, you're going to run out of stuff to do, and you've still got 2 or 3 hours to your next location. And no offense, but staring off into the distance of desert doesn't change. It's still desert, no matter how much you look at it. So after a while, like it gets just tiresome. So I just bring something comfy, whether it's comfy clothes that you wear in the car, whether it's, a pillow and a blanket, whether it's just a pillow, or whether it's your favorite fuzzy socks, just something that's comfortable that helps you just chill and relax while driving the car for hours on end.
Yeah, that's our 6 tips for a successful road trip. So we hope you enjoyed our video.
Please like and subscribe this video and comment below where you can. We would love to hear your tips on things that maybe we didn't experience or we missed, so that we have a better idea for maybe our next road trip.